So after the whole hometown battlefield thing, I just I just put my head down and went to work. That was really all I knew to do. I was I had Ryan in place. He was a great agent. We understood each other perfectly. We were friends. He just knew what I needed to do, right? He knew what markets to put me in. He was, he was a perfect match for my touring ethic. And so from 2014 basically to 2016, that's all I did. I just traveled the whole world. And so I was, only 6 years into the freedom granted me by my divorce, and I started to realize something. I had lived my entire life outside the world. I wasn't in it, and there was a reason why I wasn't in it. I was misdirected by people and myself in thinking, and I was told this, many times by famous people that I knew, I had met, and I asked questions, not normal questions, but I asked people who were superstars, how do you go out in public? How do you live your life, right? And they all told me the same thing. Mystique is everything. Don't ever divulge to the public anything about your private life or your private thoughts because the reason they clamor for stars and stardom is because it's made unattainable by the lack of information about that person. So if you open up to your fan base, they'll lose interest in you. You have to maintain this persona of someone who is outside the world and outside looking in and blah, 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 and all this kind of existential bullshit. And that's how all people who have achieved real stardom live their lives. And I looked around and I saw, in fact, that was really true. And for the most part, not everybody, but for the most part. And, if you look at it for a second, you look at guys who didn't do that, like John Lennon. Look what happened to him. Murdered in the street by a maniac who had easy access to him. And just so there's a reason why these people who had achieved such great fame decided to sequester themselves away from the general public. And so I carried myself like that for my whole life. I didn't get involved with people too much. I stayed back away from crowds, which was fine by me because I was made very uncomfortable by crowds and strangers, and I've talked about that. And I lived my whole life that way, in this persona, this trying to keep up the mystique, right? And then during this period of time between 2013 and 2016, I looked around at my life and my career and I thought, well, why am I even bothering with this? I've never sold a gold record or a platinum record or been on television every day or used in a Nike commercial. What am I bothering with this for? This is all bullshit. This doesn't mean anything. All it means is that I could die tomorrow and nobody will ever know who the hell I was, which is really important. And it's too easy it's a lot harder to actually tell people who you are, honestly, than to hide it. It's easy to show a storefront when people look at you. And I decided to take the hard road, which actually turned out to be the easiest one. I was just like, well, none of this means anything. So I'm just going to go out and do what I do. I'm not going to do any of that crap anymore because it's not it never was who I am. And I'm never going to be at that level of fame for this to even matter. And I might as well just show people who I am, and who I am is what I play. That's who I am. I'm the music. That's who I am. And when I did that and just took down every wall, still wasn't that comfortable running out into crowds of people and shaking hands and signing autographs and stuff, but I did it on numerous occasions, and it blew people away. They couldn't understand the change in me, a lot of them. And I think it gained me new fans. It gave me respect of my old fans. And I just started being very matter of fact with people on stage. I went out, I showed them all of my insecurities, and I was my normal crotchety, semi-pessimistic self, and made fun of myself and made fun of them and made fun and just said, this is all kind of ludicrous that we're even doing this, that you paid money for me to sit up here and wank for 90 minutes, which is what musicians do. I mean, I got it all boiled down to a common denominator. And that's when I really get the shock of my life. There was a newspaper article that came out sometime around 2014 or 15 somewhere. I don't remember where it was. But I had done a promotional interview, Ryan, and I had a close friend of mine in Moncton, Chris Colpaw's wife. Chris Colpaw and the Cosmic Crew is a fantastic band. And his wife, Lynn, was helping me with admin things. And between me and Ryan and Lynn, we were covering all the bases when it came to administration of my career. And Lynn was able to, field interview requests and publicity and all this other stuff. So from time to time, when Ryan sent me into a new market, I would end up doing some newspaper and television, radio, whatever, in those markets to promote the shows. So, and I was still out there alone, and I loved it. And so I do this interview, and I'm not really thinking about anything. Except I'm approaching the interview with just a completely what I just described. The guy asked me questions, and I told him the truth as I saw it. And sometimes those answers were kind of shocking because I just didn't care anymore how it affected my standing in the industry. Like, I just didn't give a shit anymore. And so, because I was having fun and making money, and I was selling out everywhere I went. I didn't care. Just none of it even mattered to me anymore. I just wanted to go out and be with the people, sit there on the stage and play music. And that's what I'm still doing in a limited fashion now, but still. So this article comes out in the newspaper, and I get to town, and somebody says, "Did you see the article? It's really good." I was like, "No, I haven't seen it." And I opened the paper, and it was a big article, like half a page. And the headline said, "Canadian music legend plays in blah, blah town." I don't remember where I was, unfortunately. And I read it twice. I was like, what? Wait, what? And I thought, this article's not about me. And sure enough, it was. But that word exploded off the page at me. Legend. I had some ambivalent feelings about that. I didn't like it at first. I still don't really like it, but the first thing that, as soon as I read that word, I thought, holy shit, I feel old. And then I thought, this is embarrassing, because there's other people in my peers that have done just as much and more than me in this business, that they don't get called this, and they should. Dave Gunning, there's so many that are way more worthy of that tag than me. And I was just reading the article, and it was a glowing article, and and then it just seemed to keep happening. That word kept getting thrown in, and then the next thing I started to hear was the term legacy artist. And that really made me nervous. I was like, why do I feel like these people are hastening me into the graveyard? And I would hear these guys, these artistic directors, and even Ryan, they would call from festivals and go, yes, of course we want JP, he's a legacy artist. And it was the same thing. It just kept happening and happening. The legendary this, the legend guitar player, the legendary songwriter, one of Canada's blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? What's going on? This happened really overnight. And that's a shit word to say in conjunction with this industry, because nothing happens overnight. And in fact, this didn't happen overnight. But to me, it did. To me, I was suddenly put in the shoes of the common music listener, which I also am. I'm a fan of music and fan of hundreds of other artists. And I myself have looked at people, and when he got famous overnight, it just happened overnight. I know better than that, but I still say it. And now here I was on the other side of the fence going, this seemed to happen overnight, but I knew it didn't happen overnight. And that's how I had my ultimate epiphany. I realized that, and this is kind of sad. I don't ever want to demean or show a lack of appreciation for people who say those kind of things about me, because I really appreciate it, and I love you, and there's been many people who have spoken very kindly of me over the last 10 years. And so, but I learned something incredibly valuable. I didn't get to that stage of being called a legend and a legacy artist because I was successful. Which is so funny to me. That's the funniest thing ever. I've never had a number one song. I've never had a million-selling record or a gold or platinum album, I never was on, David Letterman or Johnny Carson, or featured on MTV, I never was on the radio, really, to any extent. I didn't achieve anything, any of the things that would make me, quote unquote, a star, right? I didn't do any of it. I didn't manage to do any of it. I tried. There's no doubt in my mind, as I described earlier in this video, I definitely wanted to achieve it, and I was trying to, carry myself in such a way that it would come to me, but it never did. And this is kind of odd, and I got to stick it in here just because. and this is not sour grapes, it's just an observation, because one of the pieces of evidence of how bad I wanted to climb that ladder of success is that if you look back at some of my oldest recordings, you'll see that I was constantly about 5 to 7 years ahead of where the industry was musically. My first major fiddle record that I made with CBC was nothing like any other record that had ever been done. It was with a full band, drums, bass, piano, guitars, banjos, mandolins. It was an extravaganza of the love of the fiddle, and I threw everything I could throw in it. So, but it didn't do anything. And then 5 or 6 years later, 5 to be exact, really, maybe even not that much, 4, Natalie McMaster hits, right? And Natalie McMaster hits playing some of my tunes that I wrote and gave her. She became a superstar based upon the idea that fiddle didn't have to be just fiddle and piano. It could be played with a full band. There could be other soloists involved in it. There could be... I had done that 5 years earlier. Nothing. The same thing can be said about the type of singer-songwriter stuff I was doing. Another recording that was done at CBC in the late 80s, 1990, somewhere around there, 80, 89, and 90. A few years later, it was like that music was not normal. It was it was tinged with Americana. I was covering interesting songs. I was writing interesting songs. I wasn't that great a vocalist back then, but it was still something very different. The CBC turned it down for commercial release twice. We tried twice to get the CBC to actually put out the record, and they wouldn't do it. Just after that, the Rankin Family hit. And just prior to this, Rita was hitting. Rita McNeil. And it just seemed like every time I went into the studio and recorded something, trying to be at the top of my game and pushing the envelope, I somehow pushed it too far. I pushed it too far beyond where the industry was ready to accept it. And that was pretty well the way things were the whole time, right up until I did Another Morning, and even that was ahead of its time. And I don't think that. I'm just actually, the reason I say that is because so many other people have said to me that record was way out ahead. We weren't expecting anything like that. And that's why that album did so well and remains the best-selling, most well-known album of my entire career. But it barely sold anything. It's weird. Like, it's not an album that went gold or any of those things. We don't even know how much it sold. But it seemed to affect hundreds of thousands of people. And I never caught up with it. It was weird. I kept pushing the envelope in front of Another Morning, but never got the same attention. But I had a good time. I had a great time. And I put really good records out. But they just never hit the way that one did. I almost caught up with I almost slowed down enough at that point to be in sync with the industry. But I didn't quite nail it. We never did get attention from major labels. We had lots of attention from radio. Lots of attention from radio. But we couldn't translate it. So with all that being said, and that's a long story and a long observation, I got these people calling me a legend and a legacy artist and all this shit, and I suddenly realize, whilst laughing my ass off, the reason I'm being called that is not because of my prowess as a songwriter or a singer or an instrumentalist or a producer or a touring artist or any of these things. It's because I survived. That's it. That is it. That's why. In 2000, we lost John Morris, so there went the Rankin family. We lost Rita McNeil. We lost Ron Hines. Many of the bands that were promising and incredible in my peers all disbanded, fell away. Ashley fell away. Natalie went and had a family, is still immensely successful, but is not doing what she did before. I'm one of the few people left standing, is what happened. And when I say left standing, I mean just still crawling up on a stage somewhere every night and playing music. That's all I did. I didn't do anything to get that moniker, except I survived. That's really deep. It's deep and humbling. It makes you realize that as hard as life is, and it is hard, even for people who look like they have it easy, it's fucking hard. Even as hard as it is, if you do something that you believe in, that you have a natural talent for, there's nothing that can stop you except yourself. That's it. If you decide that the dividends of your activities aren't enough and you quit, you just ruined yourself. It's those people that continue to push and push and push and push through all the difficulties, all of the heartache, all of the rejection, all of the loss, all of the sacrifice, and just keep doing what you do. If you do it long enough, finally, it all starts to come into a very sharp focus. And the answer to the question is really, I wasn't out here doing this for why I thought I was doing it. Thought I was out here trying to get famous, but what I was actually doing was just cementing a future for myself. A future that's pretty damn cool. It's filled with respect. It's filled with accolades, even though you probably don't deserve them because the bulk of the world won't even know you existed. But there's going to be a very large part of it that does. And it's so hard to see that far in the future if you're perhaps right now 25 years old and very talented and gifted and you can't get anywhere. Well, I was the same. I couldn't get anywhere either. But now I'm in my 50s and suddenly I'm a legend. And I didn't do a goddamn thing to deserve it. All I did was survive. And sometimes that makes me sad because a lot of these people, I literally outlived them. And that makes me sad because they were my friends. And, unfortunately, that will happen to all of us. We'll outlive people, in our circles. And I think a lot of ways that the accolades you get from people in life, especially musicians, they're multiplied and ultra-focused because of the loss of some people around you. And they realize, that person would have wanted me to support that artist, and there's a association between people, between artists that folks see, and we're often blind to it as the players. We don't even realize when we lose somebody in this business, we just mourn them, but they're really there with us after. I believe that their life's work was such a fantastic example of what we strive to be that it affects us for the rest of our lives, and we carry part of them with us. And I think that's one of the reasons that anyone gets stuck with labels like legend and legacy artist and blah, 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 blah. That's why. And I've said that a million times on this channel. I'm only as good as all the people I copied. And if there was anything original in what I did, well, that's fine. But I only was inspired to do that, to have that originality, by the genius people I copied and ripped off and hung out with, and got to see what it was like inside their world. It's pretty deep. It's pretty deep. It was the realization of all this was incredibly liberating. It opened doors for me in my career and my life that were just, it's hard to describe. It's hard to describe the feeling that, it doesn't matter what you do anymore. It doesn't matter. If people are calling you that, let them believe that, right? Because now, that means you're done, pushing. There's no need to push anymore. Now you can just play exactly what you want, release what you want, work with who you want, and just sit back and just calm down. Calm down. There's no hurry, there's no rush. Now you've got to fill the time left with everything you love. That's the beauty of this entire situation. And so, after I finished the hometown battlefield road, I went down that as far as I could go. I just started thinking, it's time to really start living my life and living my career and living inside the world and encountering people on an even playing field. I never thought I was above anyone. As a matter of fact, probably one of the main reasons that I never did well in the industry, and I've talked about this before, is my horrible self-esteem and thinking that I wasn't good enough to be where I was, and just always feeling somehow inferior, and it makes you jaded, and all this horrible things that you feel about yourself, you project them outwards, and the people in the industry can smell blood a mile away. And if they smell it on you before they get your blood on the dotted line, they don't want you to sign. So it's 100% probability that I was directly responsible for my failure in the industry with industry people. So this newfound kind of apathy actually started to create my most innovative time as a musician. And the first thing I did, I think, when I really, because I have to really credit Dave Gunning with giving me that pep talk early, in 2013, telling me to get off my ass and go to work as me. Don't hide behind anybody. Go to work as yourself. And because he was doing it very successfully. So I reached out to Dave, and a project was born out of that call. Now, I live not far from Dave. I only lived, 10 minutes away from him. Used to go over there all the time. So one night I went over there with this song called I Never Pick Cotton. And it was an arrangement of an old country song. It was written in Nashville in the 60s. It was done by Roy Clark and then Johnny Cash, and a bunch of people did it. But it was a very interesting song. The lyric was incredible, but the melody was also incredible, but the chord structure was really weird. It was a one-chord song, basically. It modulated once in the middle, and that was it. It was one chord. It just held the one for the whole verse, and the chorus went into another chord, but it held that chord for the whole time, right? Just a bizarre song. And I fleshed it out. I turned it into a masterpiece because I kept the melody, of course, and the lyric, but I put in all the musical things I thought should be with it. So I built this huge chord progression and a solo, and I incorporated the melody from Dixie into it, and I did all this stuff, and I thought this is a great, and I had recorded it myself years before and never released it, and it was always one of my favorite demos. And so I went into Dave's and I said, check this out, man, we should cut this song. And so we started drinking some Uncle Leo's smoked porter, and we ended up cutting the song together with just two guitars and two voices, and it became something that blew us away. We were sitting there, and you're talking about a guy that I've been working with for 20 years at this point. We'd seen everything together, done everything together, played everything together. There was no surprises anymore. But there actually was one surprise left. And it was the surprise that when him and I were left to our own devices in that studio and cut this song, we became like one mind. I toned my guitar playing down to match his intensity and his beautiful catalog of colors and tastes and things that he does in his guitar playing. I came down to that. I took away all the flash and all the just bullshit that you don't need. And I come right down where he was. And then he came up to meet me. He stood out further and got braver and as a guitar player. And just, so we met in the middle of this strange, field of energy and music. And the two guitars became one instrument. That's the only way for me to describe it. And it became so incredibly easily. It happened almost without us realizing what was going on. And then, of course, the vocals. We had sung together for so long, and he was such a fan of mine, and I was such a fan of his, that the same thing happened with our vocals. They became sibling, which they already were, but they became sibling. We started to sound like we were blood relatives, and again, it was not difficult to do this. It just, somehow, I guess the guitars, this third instrument we created out of two instruments, influenced the way we sang as well. And we sang as one voice. It's the only way to describe it. And we split verses, and we sang harmonies, and we sang interesting harmonies. And when the solo came, I didn't even take it. Dave took it. And it was immense, this guitar solo he took. And when we sat back and listened to the playback of this song, sipping our single malt and our smoked porter from the Uncle Leo's brewery, we just sat back and listened to this thing, and we looked at each other and went, holy shit, this is really, really good. And I said, yeah, it's kind of scary. And Dave immediately, because Dave is such a minimalist and so smart as a producer, he looked at me, he said, we can't put anything else on this. And we should do a whole record of this. And we should write some of it, and we should and he just had the vision nearly immediately about what should be done. And so over the course of about 10 nights that were broken up, by weeks of time sometimes, because he was touring, I was touring, over about 10 nights, we cut 10 or 12 songs. I don't even remember how many's on it now. In this exact same fashion, with just 2 guitars and 2 voices. The guitars were cut live off the floor simultaneously, and then the vocals were cut live off the floor simultaneously, as an overdub against the 2 guitars. And then we started messing around with whether or not we could reproduce this in the room live. It was child's play. And at the time we were building this stuff, I thought, we'll never be able to do this. We'll never be able to do all this intricate stuff and sing and stand up and, right? It was child's play. It was like we had built a vehicle that was self-driving. We just had to get in it and go down the road, and that was that. And we called the album 2. And it was at that moment when that record came out, when people started to hear that album, and I realized just how incredible it really was. When you're in the middle of something like that, you stop seeing it for what it is. All I could see from the inside was my immense love for David. He's the closest person to me, in my life outside my wife. And there was a magic in what we were doing that I had never encountered before in my own career. And I can literally say that after having this epiphany about all these different labels that were being applied to me and deciding to just not pay attention anymore to what you're taught to feel is important in this industry, I looked at this album and realized that this was the reward. This was the reward for 35 years of work. And it completely breathed a new fire into my music and into my soul. And it's one of the best records, if not the best record, that I've ever been on. And it was well received. We won an ECMA for it. We have toured it relentlessly since it came out, which I think now is almost 5 years since it came out. And it never gets old. And we've been working on doing another one. We're going to have to make another one, a follow-up, and we're going to do it exactly the same way. And I tell you this story because, number one, I want you to know how special a man Dave Gunning really is. This guy, had immense success. He wrote songs that are, in my opinion, anthemic, like These Hands and A Game Going On that he wrote with Dave Francie, and they won the Hockey Night in Canada song competition on CBC, and he sold tens of thousands of records. I don't know how many records he sold, but it's out of control. And he's toured all over the world, and he's respected in the biggest circles of songwriting, from Kerrville, Texas to you name it. He is treasured in the folk scene and is one of the greatest artists, in my opinion, that's ever come out of Canada. He didn't need to do this with me. He really didn't. He took the old fat guy in, and we made a project together, right? That has become a second career for both of us. And I can't thank him enough for that. He didn't have to do it. He wanted to do it. That's why he did it. He didn't have to. And that's a very important thing to point out, because there's been many times in my life and career when I've seen people that could have done similar things with me or other people, right? That was just so obvious that they should have done a record or a project with someone, but they don't do it because they don't need to, and they just don't seem to see the repercussions of the positive ones of what would happen if they actually did work with somebody like that. And that's why my whole career, I've never turned down anybody. I think there's value in every single possibility with musicians. Dave saw the window open and went, we're going through it. And so, subsequently, that became, in my opinion, an album that actually helps make these labels that the people give me legitimate. I'm proud of that record enough that, yeah, you want to call me a legend after that? Yeah, I'll be a legend. I'll sign up for that, but Dave's one too. And it's all tongue-in-cheek, It is. It's still all bullshit, but the music isn't. The music isn't, and my friendship with him isn't. Him and I have an understanding of each other that's profound. And if you ever meet anybody in this business that you can have that kind of friendship with and leapfrog each other your whole careers, which we did. I'd have a little bit more success, and then he'd have a little bit more success, and then I'd push harder, and then he'd push harder. And we've helped each other half of our lives, and it's been the most rewarding thing ever. And there's a word of warning in this for you. For anybody who's a musician, don't discount nothing. If you meet somebody in this business and you really get along with that person, you like them, genuinely like them, and don't ever push aside the idea that two heads are better than one, because they are. Two heads are better than one in music. And I have seen people miss out on things that could have been brilliant. Even in the highest echelons of this industry in commercial music, you wish that certain people would have gotten together and made music. What an incredible thing that would have been. But the industry didn't allow it, or the legal issues didn't allow it, or or whatever. There was things that got in the way of things that should have been done. And it's sad to me. But then I look at my record with Dave. I look at the records that were made by, Chet Atkins and Jerry Reed together, Chet and Les Paul together, Waylon and Willie, the Highwaymen, there's so many collaborations, right, that have completely altered the course of music, and then sometimes the course of history, right? It's incredibly important that we never lose sight of how important it is to collaborate and how important it is to search out collaboration. And if you can't get it from the person that that you want or whatever, push it. We should really do this. We should try this. Don't give up on that thing. If you get a feeling in your gut that there's something locked away inside a friendship with another artist, you should never let anything stand in the way of that. You have no idea what it will give birth to. And that's sort of where I have to leave this off, because it took a lifetime for me of falsely telling myself that I was gonna be a solo artist and that was gonna be it. And when I say solo artist, I mean the front man of a band or no band or whatever the case may be, that the marquee above the door of the hall had to have my name on it only. And that was a mistake. If I had have reached out to collaborate with people much earlier, or even started a band, like a supergroup, got involved with other players that were at my level, and there's many of them, there's no telling where I would be now. But at the same time, if I'd have changed earlier my course, I wouldn't be where I am now, which is where I'm incredibly happy. I feel like I'm trying to catch up to that label that I've been given, I think, too early, and with not enough information given out to people. I don't think that the case has been clearly made to call me a legend or a legacy artist. But the beautiful thing about it is I can now strive to be worthy of that. And I do every single day. I never get up in the morning and go, well, my work's done because that guy said I was this and this fellow said I was that. I don't have to do shit now. No, that's not how it works. You get up in the morning and go, well, if I want to really enjoy this and earn that tag, I got to get to work, move my ass, learn new tunes, put in some practice, write some songs, record again with Dave, record again with Tim Eady, record again with, and just keep working and working and working it. It's actually, in hindsight, at this moment right now, as I'm sitting here, it's one of the healthiest things that ever happened to me. Getting stuck with those labels too early, in my opinion. Because now I got to work. I can't sit back. And that's actually a wonderful feeling. If it makes me feel that what I'm doing now means more than it ever did. Because I got to make sure now that I don't disappoint anyone. And that means everything to me. And it means everything to me that so many people they still got my back, After all these years, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. I don't know. They're everywhere. They talk to me from all corners of the planet that love what I do and love what I did. And those people matter. They may not ever come into contact with me. They might not even ever donate, put a dime into the pot of my life, because they're not able to. They're so far away, or they can't buy a record, or they can't come see a show, or whatever the case may be. They may never put money in my pocket, but ultimately, what the fuck good is money? You can have all the money in the world. If you got no purpose, there's nothing to spend the money on. So, yeah. I'm just happy I survived long enough to see all of this go down, and also to see my friends do well and to see new people do well. I feel like that's part of the reward as well. Is as I move forward into whatever I'm going to be doing next, which is a lot of the same, but the doors are wide open to change, which is great. But I'm able now to sit back and look at some of the young ones coming up and go, whoa, it's going to be fun watching this, because there's lots of those too. And I hope the things that I've said in this series, as it's sort of drawn to a close, there'll be some more information, I guess, about the history of things. But as this whole series has happened, I hope young players look at all this and go, well, maybe I won't do that, and that he did that was a mistake. Maybe I better do this, and this, I hope they do. I really hope that's the way this works. That would be my biggest hope. That anybody who's looking at these films and following this story is taking notes. Take some notes, because I made every mistake there is to make. I still survived, but there was a lot of unnecessary pain. So, but again, I wouldn't trade anything for it. I am where I am. I am where I want to be. And I am because I'm there. I'm the byproduct of my entire journey, not any one decision, and not any concept of the future. The future's wide open. So, it always has been.